Have you ever had a moment where you realized you were living the wrong life? You were working in the wrong place. You were doing the wrong things. Many years ago, I was an investment banker working to complete a deal. It looked perfect on paper. However, in the immortal words of Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. We hit a snag. More work needed to be done. So my opposite number, Alison, stepped outside to make a call. A call that I've made many, many times before. I'm sorry, I won't be home for dinner. So we struggled on. We kept on working. And at 3 a.m., we finally cracked it. We signed on the dotted line. The deal was done. It felt fantastic. The bonus was in the bag. Yeah. So a little later, standing outside with Alison, she said to me, such a shame you missed that one. I was pretty excited. I thought we'd done great, so I wondered what she was talking about. And she said, well, the dinner that I missed, well, it was an important one for my daughter. She's moving to New Zealand in the morning. She's immigrating. They'd lived together her entire life, 22 years. And in a few short hours, she was getting on a plane to go to the other side of the planet without that special send-off. I got home about 4, checked in on my daughters. I had 2 at the time, aged 3 and 5. Looked down on them, I thought, is this the life that I want? Do I really want to be following Alison down the path where work will always come first? To me, the answer was pretty clear. So instead of going to bed, sat down at the table and wrote my letter of resignation. Now, we all have measures of success in our life. You do, I do, we all do. And up until that point, my measures of success were, how big were my deals? How many was I doing? How big was my team? How high up the ladder was? Normal stuff. That night, I realized that my entire ideas, my measures of success were wrong. There was more to life than this. Picture, if you will, a football match with a scoreboard, soccer, up in the corner. And they measure 3 things: passes completed, distance run, and possession. After a little while, the teams would become phenomenally good at these 3 measures. The patterns would be beautiful. I'm sure it'd be really interesting. But there's one problem. We're not tracking goals. And unless we track goals, no one is trying to score. The teams are becoming phenomenally good at everything, but the one thing that really matters. Now, I sometimes feel that the best way of looking at modern civilization, are we doing the right things so we can look at the next generation in the eye and hand over the planet to them with pride? For 150 years, progress has meant 3 things. First and foremost, growth. That single primary measure of success. Second, efficiency. Cheaper, faster, tighter systems. Ecosystem, supply chain stretching around the planet. And third, throughput. Consumption, production, and extraction. Since the 1970s, we have tripled extraction. We now take 100 billion tons of resources out of the earth every single year. Now, the benefits of going down this path have been phenomenal. Human life expectancy has doubled over the past 100 years. We have lifted billions out of poverty. But the system is obedient. And in a finite world, if we focus on one thing, it means neglecting something else. For most of human civilizations, we have not counted the cost of carbon. Fossil fuels have been cheap, abundant, and energy dense. We built an entire civilization around them. Now, for all the rhetoric around renewables, 80% of all of the energy in the world today still comes from fossil fuel sources. Some people, a lot of people, say that climate change is a failure, if not the failure, of human civilization. Well, I think that is entirely wrong. Climate change is the inevitable result of a system that rewards cheap energy and fast growth while having the environmental costs as invisible. So for 2 centuries, we rewarded the cheapest energy, and we burned an incredible amount of coal, oil, and gas. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have released 2 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's the equivalent of 10,000 Mount Everests. Now, fish can't see water. We've been living inside a model of success, of growth, that's been so all-encompassing that we haven't even questioned it. And that modicum we've been living under is growth is good. But growth depends on something. It depends, yes, on energy, but also it depends on healthy ecosystems, intergenerational trust, safe societies. And if we treat these things as being infinite, then growth starts to consume the very systems that makes that growth possible. Now, our children did not vote for this model of progress. They didn't agree to its metrics, but they are the ones who are going to have to live with its consequences. Borrowing from stability tomorrow to enrich us today is not progress, it is theft. We are stealing from our children. That thought made me very angry at the time, but anger on its own changes nothing. So I changed direction. When I left investment banking, I spent 2 very happy years in this wonderful institution, London Business School. And then I moved into renewable energy. My initial goal was emissions reduction. But the ultimate big plan was systems change. When I started United Renewables in 2011, there was no renewable energy to speak of in Northern Ireland. Not because the wind wasn't great or because the economics weren't good, because the system was set up to reward a different outcome. The planning rules were written decades earlier to prevent tall vertical structures in rural areas, a perfectly sensible thing to think of at the time. Who wants skyscrapers in the middle of farmland? But wind turbines are not skyscrapers, so we had a challenge. We had to fight against decades of common practice across planning, across grids, across local government. So, what changed? We fought and won 16 different planning applications, rewriting the logic of the planning system. We brought in leading experts to repurpose the grid. We worked with the grassroots level to be trying to build up momentum, and politicians listened. After 2 years of hard graft, we turned on the first investment-grade wind turbine in Northern Ireland. It's still running today in County Antrim. But that turbine did not just create electricity, it also set a precedent. On the path we followed, others came after us. Investment flooded in, and now more than 45% of all electricity within the region comes from renewable sources. The wind didn't change, the technology didn't change, but what counted as success changed. A couple of years later, we came across the same principles in Barbados. We explored the idea of developing wind on the island, and on paper it made perfect sense. The wind was good and it had a desperate need. But the project kept failing for one reason, which was hurricanes. You could not get insurance on these turbines because of hurricanes. Now, if we were looking to financially optimize our own structures, we would have just walked away, as anyone would have. But there had to be a bigger play here, and that's the development of renewable energy on an island that desperately needed it, and a small island on the front ends, the front lines of climate change. So, success had to look like something else. Could it be financed? Could it be shared? Could it be built? Could it endure? Could it help to be reducing fossil fuel dependence for the island? And when you looked at things from the other side, the answer was yes, but you needed to completely re-examine the way you were doing things. So we changed the system. We located towers from India that could be folded over in advance of an incoming storm. We located warehouses that you could put in nacelles and blades into different parts of the island, so if the worst happened, turbines could be reinstated very quickly. We put in rapid response systems. Now, this was not the most financially optimized system by any way, but it was the most resilient. And with resilience came insurance. With insurance came finance. With finance, the project was then possible. When you change what you value, different solutions appear. Change on the international stage is also possible. We saw this in the 1980s. Chlorofluorocarbonates, CFCs, were once seen as a miracle chemical. They were clean, they were cheap, they were stable, they were non-flammable, and they were incredibly useful, so we used them pretty much everywhere. But that stability started to cause a problem. When the CFCs went up into the atmosphere, they started to destroy the ozone layer, which is the thin protective shield from harmful ultraviolet radiations around our planet. The damage was invisible until it became undeniable, and the world moved. During the Montreal Protocol, CFCs were essentially phased out. Governments around the world regulated, industry reacted and innovated, and markets changed. We didn't abandon prosperity. We changed what the system rewarded. Now 99% of all ozone-depleting materials are now banned, and the ozone layer is healing. We have a similar issue with carbon now, an invisible buildup of a threat in the atmosphere caused by a system that just doesn't count the costs. If we look at the world today, we see that many of our priorities are simply wrong. But there is hope. We have a better opportunity to change what the world values now than ever before, because the entire world is looking at our energy systems. Not just because of climate change, but because of the various conflicts around the world and the impacts they're having on our energy markets. So what does system change actually mean? Well, first, we need to stop treating pollution as free. For most of human civilization, again, we haven't counted the price of carbon into our food, into our transport, into our cement, into our steel. Now, those costs haven't disappeared. They've just been taken off balance sheets and put into the atmosphere. Pricing pollution honestly means stopping pretending it costs nothing. Second is we stop calling something efficient when it's only fragile. If something is cheap in perfect conditions, but it falls apart when the world changes, it's not cheap, it's just vulnerable. We need a system that keeps on working when the world changes. And third, we need to reward assets that reduce long-term system costs. If something appears cheaper today, but it leaves us with vulnerabilities to higher energy prices, to higher insurance costs, to higher environmental damage tomorrow, it was never really cheaper, we were just pushing the bill into the future. Now, clean energy can do that. Efficient buildings can do that. Stronger grids can do that. Efficient transport can do that. Energy storage can do that. Climate change is not a morality play on greed. It's a design problem about how we measure progress. If we reward extraction, we erode the future. If we reward sustainability, we extend it. Wind and solar are already the cheapest forms of energy in most parts of the world. And the bonus is the price of wind doesn't double if Russia invades Ukraine. Sunlight travels 92 million miles from the sun to the Earth's surface, to a solar panel, and not an inch of that journey travels through the Straits of Hormuz. So renewable energy is not only the cheapest, it's also the most secure, stable, and sustainable way of developing energy. Now that is success. I sometimes think back to Alison, that night. We secured our bonuses. We stayed late. We completed the deal. Both of us did exactly what the system demanded of us. The problem is the system didn't see the cost. The cost to Alison, the cost to her daughter, a cost that can never truly be repaid. That's how systems work. They reward whatever the rules tell them to reward, but everything else is invisible, including what we're stealing from ourselves and from our children. But we are not powerless. We are powerful. We can create change through the choices we make, through the institutions we lead, through the capital we deploy, the money we spend, and through the politics we demand. If we change the rules and investment moves, innovation follows. Change what we reward, and the system reorganizes around that. We're the first generation that understands atmospheric chemistry, global capital moves, and energy systems at the same time. Also the last generation to be able to do anything about this issue. We know it's what CO2 does, we know how money moves, we know energy systems works. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. For too long, we have judged success far too narrowly by how much stuff we can push through the system and how cheap it looks like on the other end. But if we want a future where people can truly thrive, we need to reward different things. Clean and sustainable energy, systems that don't buckle under pressure, and prosperity that lasts. Systems don't respond to what we hope for. Systems respond to what we reward. And whatever we choose to reward today will decide the world our children inherit tomorrow. Thank you.